All right, welcome to the Godfo Universe podcast, the podcast where we discuss the Godfo universe, which is our creation, and various other things. Today is a various other thing. It's me, Dan, and here's Josh.
What's
Uh,
up, guys?
hey, welcome back. We're gonna be doing a lot more cool stuff like this. We're gonna have Lore Master Hans coming very soon. We hope to expand into. We're gonna have the Lamentations podcast launching very soon as well, and with Resident Daryl of the Loot Brothers podcast, and a bunch of other cool, fun stuff in as well as launching our first comic, Apollyon 20XX, this spring, and our second one, Biophile Kolga, this fall. Anything you want to
Been
add to
working
that,
real
Josh?
hard to try to bring y'all cool stuff.
Oh yeah.
Um, I do want to say like we've noticed that more of you are watching the videos, more of you are watching the podcast, listening to the podcast. So we are hoping to get that up on Spotify. Hopefully, maybe this week.
Mm-hmm.
For the people who have a hard, it's easier for them to listen to it just in the car on the way to and from work or whatnot. But keep telling a friend, keep sharing the links. Like and subscribe. Everything that can help get us a little further up in that algorithm is good. And interact with us, comment, disagree with us, like tell us how wrong we are. We love that.
Yeah, or yeah, come on and talk. I'd love to get where we can have people come in and talk to us once I can figure out a better way to stream rather than using what we're using now. Maybe we can do
Mm-hmm.
like a YouTube stream in a little bit, and then people who are in the comments can just come in and talk, as long as they don't say anything that'll get us banned. Speaking of that, today's topic.
An elegant segue.
Yeah, speaking of getting banned. We were talking about. I never know how to say his name. I've loved his books, but I've never know how to say it. Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl. How do
I
you
think
say
that's
it?
correct.
Let's see how you
I think it's Roald
pronounce
Dahl.
Roald Dahl.
Road Dog.
He's like one of the Road Warriors. Rual. It's pronounced Rual. Rual.
Raw Dog it.
Raw
Raw
dog.
Dog.
Somebody search. The next search is Rual a Welsh name? Like, did somebody get mad at the Welsh? It's
Is
English.
Raw Dog.
Roll.
He's half Wookie.
Maybe that's what. Anyway, they're doing major rewrites to his like the newest publications of his books. Which
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
looked over it a lot. Which first of all, like to give the guy his due, he wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He wrote Matilda. He wrote James and the Giant Peach. He wrote The Great Glass Elevator. To just name a few. I mean, he was a prolific writer, especially of the kids genre. Prolific in the sense prolific in the sense of not only did he put out a lot, but he put out different types of books.
Mm.
Um, that's pretty
And they
amazing.
have definitely, they've definitely stood the test of time too. I mean, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the whole Willy Wonka thing is a well that's been returned to multiple times. It's being returned to again now. They're currently doing a new version with Timothy Chalamet.
Timothy
Uh,
Stallion, Charlemagne the God.
they've just done a remake, a new musical version of Matilda. It was on Netflix back in November, and it was actually really good. If you have patience for
Musicals.
musicals,
I don't.
but I do, but it doesn't matter. So yeah, he's a prolific creator, or he was. I think he died back in '92 or '96, something like that. Mid '90s is when he died.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, let's get into this because it brings up a lot of I don't know, it brings up a lot of issues. So like, what was your initial response to hearing that this is what they were doing now with his books?
Well, I saw it on social media, so my initial response was to go to actually research it because I just saw
Yeah,
screenshots of what.
yeah.
Yeah. And it the criticism that I saw of it actually stands up. Like it is pretty bad. Like it isn't people blowing it out of proportion. Like they are actually changing phrases and descriptions that he used. Um,
Hmm.
and rewording things. Is this isn't a translation, and that's what I wanted to get into
Yeah.
right off the bat. Is because I've read. I wish I could find it, but I'd read articles basically comparing it to a translation, how it's harmless. Because there's always people that do that, like they do false equivalencies, or they do like wrong plus wrong equals right. Like, oh, well, people did this in the past, so
Hmm.
we do it now. Why aren't you complaining about it in the past? It's like, well, maybe people did, and it doesn't matter because two wrongs don't make a right. Like, or they're
Right.
like, books have been translated before, or books have been altered to help like a new culture understand. Like, like sometimes you read cliff notes of Shakespeare or something. It's like, well, that's just wonderful. But that doesn't mean that from now on all future publishing of Shakespeare is going to be changed. It means that there is
Right.
this special edition of it. I think what the controversy here is that they are trying to make this the ongoing publishing of this for time, forward.
Right. So apart from finding an older copy somewhere, which I mean, yes, you can do that. You can still do that, and in fact, it'll actually make the older copies
More
probably
valuable.
more valuable. Which is, that's its own thing. But yeah, when you look at the differences here, and like for example, I think in the new version of the Chocolate Factory book, the kid isn't referred to as being extremely fat
Yeah, he's
anymore,
described as
or
enormous.
yeah, and I know there's probably people that say, well, then that's more progressive, that's good because kids don't need to be exposed to this, that, and the other. But the reality is, it's a good thing for young readers to encounter problematic things from the past. If in fact they are problematic, then as a young reader landing on those things, as you read Tom Sawyer as a kid and you get to the way that some of the wording in Tom Sawyer, and you're like, well, why is he calling that character this? And it's a good thing to see, okay, this is set a long time ago, and the way they acted, the way they talked about people then versus the way they treat people now, at
Mm-hmm.
least in theory, has changed. And that's not a bad thing for a kid to experience and parse. Like as an adult, there's plenty of things that I might read that are offensive to me in some way, or that I have to wrestle with the content. That's fine. You know, I don't think that you're protecting the children by doing that. So, that's one side of it. And then the other side of it is this is a person he's dead. He has died. His legacy is what he did. It's his legacy is these books. And if you go back and you change things to the point that you change his intent,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just a simple change. You're changing the intent of how he presented these characters, how he wanted the reader to see these characters, and you you do not have the right, in my opinion. Like if I write it and years down the road I decide, you know what, I'm not comfortable with what I wrote at that point in time, so I'm gonna go back and change it. That's fine because it's my intellectual property.
Yeah.
I wrote it. I can go back and I can edit it. But to do that with somebody else's work who is not here to say I don't consent to that change, that to me that's a much larger problem.
Yeah, it's always bureaucrats and cowards that end up changing what an artist did. Like
Mm.
it's usually after the artist is dead because they're cowards. I don't think there's good intention behind it. That's the problem because the people that like did this are
Mm-mm.
like inclusion boards and all that kind of stuff. I think this is
Mm-hmm.
language control. Because the
Mm-hmm.
words are always things like the company said it worked with inclusive minds. Both of those words are capitalized. That's the name of the company, an organization that works for inclusivity in children's books. Look, man, if it's a children's book, I can guarantee you it's already quote unquote inclusive. Like, because
Mm-hmm.
children kind of,
Mm-hmm.
when you write for children, you kind of write for a universality even more than you do for adults. Because
Mm-hmm.
children, that's what you're trying to teach them mostly is universalities, black and whites.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably why his books did so well, was because they tapped into how children understood the world. So
Yeah.
I don't know how you get
And
more inclusive than
they,
that.
there it's okay to take negative traits, negative character traits, and apply them to a villainous character.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that people are already hearing that and saying, well, it's not a character trait to be overweight. Look, I know I I'm overweight too. I'm not, but there is, I know that there's things that people can't help, but then there's things that you can help.
Mm-hmm.
And traditionally, for a long time, villainy was portrayed as the
Gluttonous.
greed, the gluttonous, and all that stuff. That is a trait that goes along with villainy, and it has for a very long time. The poor and the malnourished look at the
Mm-hmm.
greedy and the fat and say, well, oh my,
Well,
that's the
what? I
enemy.
mean,
That,
progressives still use the term capitalist pigs for a reason. That was the portrayal
exactly.
in all the
And
media, in like USSR, Soviet media. It was the capitalists were pigs that consumed.
when you look at books where there's a kid that's a bully, well, 9%, 90% of the time, the bully is the big kid because you can't like push him around. Like,
Yeah.
I understand saying, oh, it's, we don't want kids to call other kids fat and all that stuff. I get that, but at the same time, that's where hopefully somebody, a parent, a teacher, somebody has communicated that to the child already. They read the book and they realize, okay, maybe that's not the nicest way to put it, but it's fiction.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's okay to see people do the wrong thing in fiction. It's
and in both
okay
of
to hear a
these,
writer.
in both examples that were in there, James and the Giant Peach, one of the ants is super fat and one of them is super bony. And
Right.
in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the character that's described as fat is Augustus Gloop, and it's mentioned directly that his overweightness is a direct response to a moral failing on his and his parents' fault. Like it, that's what exactly he's saying is this is something that could have been controlled. This isn't an example of a genetic thing.
You're right. He's holding it up as an example of a poor character, and it's a cautionary.
Mm-hmm.
And when you remove the cautionary tale from the children's books that are meant to help shape their minds towards, I don't want to be like this, well, then you're setting up bigger problems than people want to realize. This whole idea of inclusivity is sounds right on the surface, and there is a degree to which it is right, but then there's also we don't embrace, or we shouldn't embrace, flaws that are within your control.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, and I know it's a delicate thing, but the reality is you don't need to enable bad character.
Yeah.
And one of the best ways to not enable bad character is to display it, and display it as something that is not desirable. That's what a cautionary tale is.
Yeah. Well, up until recently, being out of shape was seen as a moral failing. That doesn't mean having a
Go to Japan and it still is.
yeah. Well, a lot of countries it still is. I mean, and that's not to say a disabled person as a moral failing. I mean, that was actually what Jesus
Of course
had to
not.
argue against whenever he healed someone.
Yeah,
They
of
said, "Who
course
sinned,
not.
this man or his parents, that he is disabled?" Basically,
Hmm.
and Jesus, of course, said, "Nobody. It's nobody's fault. This is just what happened, and for me to heal him." But I mean, that's been in cultures for a long time. Only until recently, when you don't have to be physically fit to basically help society, that we've deemed it okay that you don't
Hmm.
have to be. Well, there's one thing between being kind of out of shape because you have a sit down job and having a moral failing, which is where you consume too much and move too little, and both of those can go hand in hand. I'm an example of that. I'm like overweight over here because I had two kids and I have a sit down job, but I also don't get up and work out like I should. And
Hmm.
I know it's harsh. I mean, I have children, and it's very hard to explain that kind of moral failing to them. But you just have like cautionary tales are the best way to do that. Is you show
Hmm.
the end result of continued habitual patterns. Basically, you show what happens
Hmm.
when bad habits are allowed to go unchecked.
Exactly. Exactly. And what we don't do is celebrate a bad habit.
Yeah,
What we don't do is pretend that the bad habit's okay and wash over it and never address it, because then it just continues to be, once it becomes acceptable to everyone, then why don't we all just not care? Why don't we all just let everything go?
yeah. Well, that's the
When did it become a bad idea to be healthy?
yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. Is all of this. Whenever someone mentions, I hate to say it, but for the most part, especially groups like this, when they mention inclusivity, what they mean is they're trying to take the exceptions and the quote unquote outcast, the outer, and make it the center.
Yeah.
Well, you quickly find out that why that's not the center is because it can't hold as a center. But they
Hmm.
don't think that far. They never have. They never do. If you want to go, whichever the ultimate, like I hate to keep bringing it back into this, but I mean that kind of idea is what leads to communist revolutions or even like fascist revolutions, where you bring the deplorable and the outside and the awful into the center. Everything just falls apart, and then it's like, oh well, we need total tyrannical control, and that's what a lot of this is. A lot of this smothering, I should say, of this kind of stuff of, oh, everything's okay, everything's
Mother
safe.
Russianing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason. There's a reason it's called the motherland. It's as long as it's
Uh,
mothering and smothering. It's like, oh, everything's okay, okay. It's like, okay, well then now you're a tyrant because you have to keep it okay.
yeah.
You have to change the
Yeah.
entire world to make it okay.
Yeah. And it's funny because the same people who are pushing for these things are the people who would condemn book burnings and bannings.
No, well they condemn their book burnings and bannings.
Exactly. And it's just mind blowing to me. But you're right that the mothering view is probably the best way to look at it. They're trying to take and round off any sharp edge. And there's a lot of places that we can see this. But Dan, you and I grew up with movies and TV shows and stuff that were made with kids in mind during the 80s and 90s. And those kid movies
Mm-hmm.
had sharp edges.
Yeah.
And we love those movies, and they are absolutely adored, not just by us, but by generations after us will go back and watch those movies and love them. And yeah, they might be afraid of them a little bit, or there may be parts of them that make them uncomfortable, but they're supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was, it was okay to see, okay, well, this character's dad is an alcoholic and he's scared to go home because he knows his dad's been drinking. He's going to
Yeah,
beat him
you knew that
when he
kid
gets
or you were
home.
that kid.
Exactly. And to to round off and sand the edges off of that, or to sand off the edges to where, like, I mean, you and I both we grew up watching like the Home Alone movies.
Mm-hmm.
And you watch like the first, really especially the first Home Alone movie. That movie was not afraid to show you that the strange person that weird strange man in your neighborhood was somebody you probably needed to leave alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to deal with the actual fear of adults saying that an adult could hurt me.
Yeah.
You know, it's actually a good thing for kids to see. Hey, you know what? Not every adult out there is gonna protect you.
Yeah.
Like, most of them are probably dangerous to you, so you should avoid them.
Well, with to be fair, a lot of people writing stuff for kids now don't have kids, and
Mm.
they're still children, but they're not. They're like 20 to 30-year-old children, and
Yeah.
when you're a kid, you want to grow up and not and but what has to happen is adults are supposed to create a path for you to grow up properly, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what stories were for, is like, here's good, here's bad, here's how you do this, and you want to be the good guy because not only are they virtuous but they're cool. Well, then what
Mm-hmm.
happens is, you start making the bad guy cooler, and that kind of brings
Mm-hmm.
things down, and then you make everybody stupid and you make them childish, like a lot of well, there's a reason millennial humor is so cringy, where everything is so kiddie and stupid and laughed at, and it's pathetic, and there is no like good and bad anymore. Everything's gray, and everybody's an awful person.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know how to be an adult, and
Yeah.
you, I mean, I don't quite frankly, I don't know how it's anybody's. But this just seems like very mommy state or nanny state. It's like, it's none of your business how this person wrote his book. Just don't buy it for your kid if you don't like it, and that's the whole thing that
That's
gets, yeah.
yeah, that's my thing. I mean, a few years ago we saw this with the Dr. Seuss, but at least with Dr. Seuss, they said, like, there's just a small handful of books that, looking at them now, we feel like we don't necessarily want to take those specific books. And to be fair, the ones they pulled, there's a good reason for why they pulled them. But that's fine. We don't want to publish these anymore.
Yeah,
You have the right to do
a
that.
publisher reserves
Don't
the
They
right
didn't
not to
change
publish.
it.
Yeah, exactly. The publisher
Right, but they
reserves the
didn't
right.
change it.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
big difference.
And yeah, there's a huge difference between saying we're not comfortable with putting more copies of this out for kids,
Mm-hmm.
and saying, we're going to, and it was also, to be fair, the books that they pulled that were Dr. Seuss books, those were not like Cat in the Hat. And I mean, you look at all the conservatives and the way they respond to it, they acted like Hop on Pop and Cat in the Hat and Green Eggs and Ham were disappearing, and they're
Yeah.
not. It was some much older books that were much more obscure. They weren't They were some that I'd never even heard of.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but what we're talking about here is taking well-known, beloved, classic children's books and changing them after the death of the author. That's not okay.
Yeah, this is more insidious because it's one thing to remove something and someone can go get it. It's another thing to utilize something for the first steps of potential indoctrination or propaganda, which is what this is. This
Right.
I'm not saying what the changes they put in there are that, but when you say this is okay, you open the door to allow that.
It's setting a precedent
Mm-hmm.
that should not be allowed to be set.
Well, and people bring up the idea that slippery slope is a fallacy. It's like, look, no, the way I function is, if I think that I could do something for my own personal gain that's nefarious, I guarantee you, activist groups and governments have already thought of it. Or will do it,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
There's a reason Epstein didn't Epstein himself. um,
Yeah.
no, I mean, there's certain things that should be out of reach of children, at least in the public domain. That's a whole other argument.
That's the thing. The same people that want to do stuff like this are the same people that want to over sexualize the kids, that want to expose them to things that they absolutely should not see and are not prepared in any way, shape, or form to process and maturely handle. They want to expose them to all this stuff, but at the same time, we can't have them hearing the word fat.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't understand it.
because I'm not even going to try to go into their reasoning because it doesn't matter. And I don't necessarily agree with the far right. I should say far, but like some of the conservative people either wanting certain books removed. Now I agree, like sexualization. I don't know why a book on sexual activity would be included in any public school except for maybe a high school library. Because like when I was in high school, I think you got certain parts of it, the library you could go to when you were like in 12th grade. And I mean, there was gonna be stuff like Catcher in the Rye, where I think he like meets up with a whore and gets like his balls kicked by like a pimp or something like that. So there's that kind
Mm.
of stuff. I mean, I think but I don't know why it wouldn't just be hard to say, okay, if you're not 18, some of these books are you can only check out when you're 18, and
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
I don't know why that's such a hard arc for everybody. It's like, can we all just agree that when a kid is 18 and they're no longer a kid, they're an adult, they can read whatever they want, or they can read books that their parents have. You know what I mean? Like at home. I don't know why.
Exactly.
I don't know why we have to provide. Quite frankly, I don't know why schools have libraries anyway when we already have public libraries. Like you can go to a library without it being in a school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's what you just came up with though on a left wing progressive argument. It's a miluge of crap. It's the reasoning that kids have to be nice about themselves and to each other. They can't be told anything bad, but they can also be shown like how like extreme sexual acts work step by step.
Yeah, it's such a crazy dichotomy that we live with right now, which I mean everything's crazy. But it brings up another point too, and I think maybe this is a generational thing, and it may just be that you and I and others like us, maybe we were just grew up in a different world in a different part of the country at a different time, and maybe that it's just impossible for me to see things any other way. But I know that when I was in fourth grade, third grade, fourth grade, around the time, I was the chubby kid. I had the like the trifecta. I was fat, I had glasses, and I had braces. And when you added me being a nerd on top of that, I I got bullied. I got called names. I got made fun of. And you know what it made me do? It made me work out and take karate and learn how to defend myself and get in better shape.
Yeah, and it also gave you a sense of humor.
Yeah, I mean it's not to say that it's okay for kids to bully other kids. That's not what I'm saying. But when you don't, when you don't take care of yourself, when you do sit back and not push yourself, to be healthy, and you hit somebody that's maybe not very gentle about it,
Yeah.
it does make you realize, you know what, maybe I should, maybe if I don't like being called fat, I should try not to be fat.
Well, I
You
think
know,
the idea used to be that there's a-holes in the world. You got to learn to deal with them. And now it's
yeah.
we can't have any a-holes in the world. We have to fill every hole. I,
uh,
what's really weird with this kind of stuff though is when kids are used, which I didn't see any of that, but when kids are used like for political stuff. What's really weird to me is the massive change, and maybe this is a completely different topic, but man, when I was a kid, school sucked. Like, why would I didn't want to be a part of it in any way. I didn't want to go to it, and I certainly wouldn't have had like the teachers back or the teachers unions back or the schools back if someone like wanted to make changes to it. I'd be like, what do I care? I don't want to be there anyway. To me, it would be like a prisoner being mad that like prison guards aren't paid enough. Like what would I care? Like, it, but it seems like kids are just being, from whatever angle, kids are being radicalized and indoctrinated into politics so quickly for some reason. And it's just like, man, when I was a kid, like I would have been like, get bent. I want to like watch The Simpsons and play Zelda. Like, I guess maybe we just have
well, I
maybe
mean,
these kids are just way more losers than we were.
well, all the Greta Thunbergs of the world
The
and
actors
stuff,
of the
but
world.
Exactly, and that is part of it though, and not to throw everybody loves to throw around Nazi Germany all the time, but they did
Yeah, the
this.
Hitler Youth.
They used they used children that were indoctrinated as puppets. They put them up there as to push propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing is happening now. And it's not, excuse me, it's not just on the that end of things either. It's not just the extreme left that does it. Um, we see it in a lot of places. We see how we see it in the church.
Yep.
How many videos do you see on Instagram or something where there's some 9 or 10-year-old kid hops up and starts behaving as though they were a 40-year-old minister or something, and you can't tell me that that's some spontaneous thing that wasn't taught. And I'm sure there's somebody that'll hear that and tell me how little faith I have, but the reality is that's a kid who's been taught to behave a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't see that on my Instagram. I just see pictures of pigs and bulldogs, but
It's a happy place.
I make sure it is. Well, and like this, like to go back to it, like Disney when they put the front of their warning on the front of stuff now, Disney Plus, like this program includes negative depictions and or mistreatment of people or cultures. Well, what if those people are villains in the show? They should be mistreated. These stereotypes were wrong then and are wrong now. Rather than remove this content, we want to acknowledge its harmful impact, meaning we don't want to lose money, learn from it, and spark conversations to create a more inclusive future together. All right, here's the thing: inclusivity is not a moral good on its own. Like it's just an idea. It's a neutral idea. It's not a positive one.
It's not a good idea for the sheep to include the wolves.
Yeah, and it's yeah, and I mean that's all. That goes into a whole argument with democracy, where like democracy is two wolves agreeing to eat one sheep. Like,
yeah, exactly.
uh, Disney is committed to creating stories with inspirational and aspirational themes that reflect the rich diversity of the human experience around the globe. No, you're not. To learn more about how stories have okay, whatever. That's the thing is it's such crap because it's like I'm not gonna go down the typical thing where people are like they don't want diversity of thought or whatever. It's like no, the rich diversity of the human experience around the globe. Disney is never gonna show a jihadist movie, like that's never gonna happen. They're not gonna show, you know, they're not gonna show the camps in China. That's not gonna happen.
No. No, but what they will do is take an episode of the Proud Family and create and produce an entirely false version of American history, where they have blatantly rewritten history into things that did not are demonstrably untrue, that did not happen, and shove it down your throat and try to make you feel some sort of guilt over a historical event that did not happen. It's a complete fiction. They'll do that.
When do I get the slam poetry song for like my Irish ancestors in Europe? Like
one day shipping up to Boston.
Yeah.
I lost my blood.
Like we already have Braveheart. Which I think even that was like wrong, wouldn't it? Because like I think William Wallace.
Oh, yeah, that was a very inaccurate movie.
Wallace, apparently, I don't think he was even as successful as Robert the Bruce was. I think.
Robert the Bruce was much more.
He was like the better
historically
leader,
a lot more important.
And didn't like they won their freedom? Was it for like a year or something before the English came back and crushed them? Or something? I know those are Scottish, not Irish guys. I'm just saying that's the closest the Irish have gotten to a war movie, except maybe any civil war movie. If you don't believe me, guys, like I think was it is it Gangs of New York that did it well? Maybe Lincoln, one of those where like they're
Yeah.
just signing up the Irish as they come in to go fight in the Northern Army. It's like that's the one movie you'll get like depicting the reality of what happened. It's like, yeah, you got off the boat. All right, you're going to war. Who are we killing? You see this line? The guy's below this line. Well, how do I tell them apart? They're wearing a blue or whatever or red. I don't remember what the Confederacy wore. Was it red? I think it was red.
Gray.
Was it gray?
Gray.
I think it was gray. Yeah.
They probably wore just about whatever they could find.
It was gray. Yeah, because I remember Yankee blue being a color for a while in the South. Yankee blue.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah, it's just
they wore wife beaters and jeans
to this day. It's especially Disney. Disney's just full of crap. And this mindful, what are they called? I just pulled them up. This company, Mindful Inclusivity or whatever they are. I mean, what a made up job. My job is to make books that have been like ridiculously popular for half a century, like better somehow. Like I'm gonna change a few words and phrases, and I've done my job to make this book even more successful. Sure, you have. I'm sure.
Addition by.
Oh, the Oompa Loompas are no longer small men; they're now small people. Does any woman want to be an Oompa Loompa?
Snooki did.
I forgot that brought
along with any girl who's ever been in a pageant and got a spray tan. Look like they just.
Let's go on record now with that. Pageants are creepy. Like, cause
yes, they are.
That is always that comes up with this. Because when you talk about any kind of book banning now, people always make it about transgender stuff, and then they bring up the drag stuff, and then they bring up the pageant stuff, and like. I've never known any single person ever that has put their kid in a pageant. And like I've been to like maybe a house of like a friend of a friend whose mom had like a picture of one of their kids in a pageant, but I didn't really know them. I guess because like my parents had good taste in people. Like, yeah, pageants are weird.
It's a big thing. It's a big thing, but it's always freaked me out. I don't like creepy. Seeing them look like. Yeah,
they always look like 40-year-old or 50-year-old like grandmothers. Like
yeah, it's and that the spray tan always looks like they got thrown in a bag of Cheetos and shook up.
I would never put my daughter in a pageant. Like that's just it's so weird and it's so creepy. I don't think
the messaging is not very very good either.
Yeah, I don't think it's something that's good for them. Girls got girls got enough body image crap to deal with. That's why she's not having a phone ever. Like. And that's the thing. That's the thing. People
there's enough insecurity there.
Can we admit that pageants are creepy, and that 99.99% of the internet and all of social media is creepy for girls? Like, let's just
I get it. It's a weird
dismiss
place.
it across the board openly and be like, no, I am not okay with any of it for my child.
Yeah.
So if someone wants to call me a hypocrite, like no, like none of it. I don't care. Like she can read books. Like
she can want to all she wants.
She can read lots.
Daddy's gonna say
she can read lots of books about Augustus Gloop being fat. I am fine with that. Alexandra Strick. Oh, that's an unfortunate name for someone who co-founded Inclusive Minds. Miss Strick. They aim to ensure authentic representation. Well, some kids are fat. By working closely with the book world, and with those who have lived experience in any facet of diversity. Man, what does that sentence mean? In any facet of diversity. Well, I mean, I know what that means, but you can't like what they mean by diversity is whatever they're against. It's different than whatever they're against. So, if you don't like certain people, diversity just means not that.
And you know what? The reality is that's fine. Have things that just show you the things you want to see. I'm okay with that. I am perfectly okay with books
But that
existing.
involves talent, Josh.
Yeah, but see, and it goes back to what you were saying that if this is really what they stand for, what they should be doing is putting the energy and into finding people that are talented, that are of these different backgrounds that they claim to have from every facet of
Of diverse
humanity.
of diversity.
Yeah, diversity. Find those people and find one that can actually write, and have them write something new that checks all your boxes. Don't take something you don't like and change it.
But Josh, hard work is white supremacy, according to the museum.
I'm
What
telling
was
you,
that?
man, it's weird.
It was that racist ass list that was like up there for like a week. It was so terrible. It was like something. It was like something the KKK would have written in the 50s.
Man, it's
It was
unreal.
awful. But it was something like hard work and punctuality or parts of white supremacy or something. And it's like, well,
Cutting your grass,
somebody forgot to tell all of
having,
Asia.
yeah, having good, like having a well maintained lawn is racist.
Man, who knows? A notice from the publisher sits at the bottom of the copyright page of the latest editions of Dahl's books. The wonderful words of Roald Dahl can transport you to different worlds. Well, wonderful. Maybe we should let it do that instead of dragging it back to ours. And introduce you to the most marvelous characters. Too bad we changed them to be like people we know today. This book was written many years ago, and so we regularly review the language to ensure that it can continue to be enjoyed by all today. Well, you know what? It was already enjoyed by all today.
Yep.
You just made it less enjoyable. What is it? You didn't make Christianity any better. You just made rock and roll worse.
Yeah. Frank Hill. That is one thing I cannot wait to see the new season of King of the Hill
It's
as
just
they tackle some of this mess.
it's just gonna be them saying that Dale was right. What else could you do at this point? I mean, Salman Rushdie has come out against these changes, and if anybody's got a reason to like speak against censorship, it's that guy. Roald Dahl was no angel. I don't care, but this is absurd censorship. Yeah, good for him. I'm
Yeah,
glad he said that.
glad somebody is.
He wrote
Well, but
fantastic.
see,
He wrote Fantastic Mr. Fox as well. Like apparently Roald Dahl just was hitting them out of the park left and right, man.
oh yeah, he was prolific, and and as creators ourselves, I know what you're thinking
No,
about.
no, you don't. Because I meant to say he's the Mark McGraw or what's his name? The guy, the juicer that was hitting all the home runs. Mark McGuire.
That sounds
I
McGuire.
was gonna say he's the Mark McGuire, but my brain said Mark McGrath, which I think is the guy from Sugar Ray. I was this close to saying he's the Mark McGrath of novelists.
That would mean he had like 2 hits and then disappeared.
Did you see that video where he tried to beat up that guy for calling him Sugar Gay one time? He got so mad. It's like, dude, come on, like that's not even like an insult. Like this, like okay, Sugar Gay. I saw it on TMZ one time.
Jeez.
Anyway,
But no, I
he's
mean,
the
like,
Mark
as
McGuire of child novelists.
the Michael Jordan. No, I just as creators ourselves though, like I as an author, as an artist, we're
As a
trying to
former fat
create
kid.
something as a current fat man. Now we are trying to create stories ourselves that are diverse,
Mm-hmm.
but like you don't have to demonize one group or eradicate a group to have a diverse story. You just write other characters and let them be interesting. Like I just I don't like the idea of I don't know. I don't like the
Yeah.
idea of censorship at all, and I don't like the idea of token diversity.
Well, the one of the defining points of progressive ideology, and I'll say on the left and right wing because people forget that progressive ideology is on the left and the right
Yeah.
for some reason. Because progressive literally just is the idea of pushing history towards its established end goal that you believe it should go to, is that it's all parasitic. It can't create. It has to do like this. It has to get into something that's already established and take it over and use it
Mm-hmm.
as a public. It can't create. Progressive politics, that entire ideology has never been creative. It's always been
Yeah.
parasitic.
Yeah. It's
I mean,
always
that's
been
but
subversive.
that's why Hitler um he co-opted so much stuff. He appropriated so many things. He appropriated music. He appropriated ideas. He appropriated the swastika for crying out loud. These aren't
Mm-hmm.
creative ideas. I mean, Stalin
Yeah.
did the same thing. Like none of these people, Mao did the same thing. They're not creative. They've never been. And as long as you are thinking in those terms of we have to make society what it should be, you're not going to be creative because you're not
Yeah.
open to the possibility of what could be. You're trying to force history into a line of what you think it should be.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I mean, that's the whole thing. Is like we specifically have tried to do things they either haven't been done before or in ways they haven't been done before. And if we have to get this petty, a lot of our or a lot of our characters are people of color, if we have to use that term, which I would just say they're people. but it's not an intentional idea to like do this for tokenization or to do this for points or to sell it. It's just we think this is like what looks good on a page or what looks good in design, or that's usually it. It's like it comes down to a design thing because it's a visual medium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
It's also, the backgrounds and the history these characters have
yeah,
that inform who they are and the decisions they make. You know, it if it serves the story, then
mm-hmm.
they are going to have a certain background. It's not looking at and say, "Oh, we need more brown people,"
Yeah,
or "We need a yellow person," or "We need whatever."
purple, or blue.
Purple, porpoise.
Well, to give an example, to go because this is the Godfall Universe podcast, so let's talk about the Godfall Universe real quick. The reason Zero, his brother Negative, and the denominator are black is because they come from certain African nations where the Order has um, exploited the people through like
Yeah.
like we have done today, like everybody has done today. It's like Africa's kind of like the world's punching bag, unfortunately. Um,
Hmm.
and that's why they are the character they are today. Um, she is Chinese because we kind of wanted to include like the CRISPR program, which is an actual thing of gene editing that is happening. Um, Maria is Colombian because there's I mean we wanted to kind of touch in some of the stuff that happens in that kind of region, especially with drug cartels. I mean, so a lot of that happens more like in Mexico than in Colombia, but still, uh, little things like what's her Chuni is
A Sikh. A
yeah, she's
Sikh.
a Sikh. I never know how to properly pronounce that. I think Sheik is a king, and Sikh, she's a Sikh, and she's been dealing with kind of um she's been caught between religious extremisms, not from her side, but from other sects and other groups. And I think that's how you kind of do it. And that's the whole thing is like if you don't have to have a reason for making a character the way they are, but I mean, if you're gonna in today's age, if you're gonna diversify intentionally, which I don't think you should probably do anything like that intentionally, at least go with it and have a reason and make them a character.
Right.
And that's what
Well,
I
see,
want.
that's
I
and
wanted a global cast. You know.
right. And the thing is, those aspects of who they are in, inform their character, their motivations, their decisions. They're not just a color,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're not just, oh, there's a black girl. there's a Chinese man. Like it's the whole character is wrapped up in that.
Mm-hmm.
And they also don't stay that same place that we meet them. Like
Mm-hmm.
they grow from that place, and they grow to appreciate one another. They grow to work together. And they will have times when they don't work together well. They will have times when they clash against each other because they're different and they don't see the world the same way. They don't have the same set of background experiences. Their schemas are different, but they learn how to say, okay, there's something bigger than us. And that to me is an interesting character, not just saying, well, I want us, we need to have somebody that's this, that, or the other. We need to check a box.
Well, and I hate to use this but it's so true. That's what racism is. Racism is thinking that because a person looks a certain way, that they encompass the entire worldview and lived experience of other people who look that way.
Right.
But that is what anti-racism is now. It's to assume that and then blame other people that look differently for their entire group. What the
Yeah.
whole thing is, like, when Zero brings them together, is that they've shared past trauma, basically, and it came in
Mm-hmm.
a myriad different ways. But the whole point is that because they're individuals and because they're humans, they're all affected by it, no matter when it
Mm-hmm.
took place. Because some of them are time displaced. I shouldn't say time displaced. Some of them are lived before and were frozen, basically. There's no time travel in our stuff. Um, so they're from different times, basically, different religions, different locations, different cultures, but they all share that they're human. And that's the whole thing. And Zero brings them together because of that.
And they all suffered at the hands of the order, who have had the same ideologies for a really long time.
Mm-hmm. Who are progressives in the idea that they think history has to go a certain way, and that they have to be a nanny state to a certain degree and push everything that way, and that they're the few council special Soviet elite that get to determine that for everybody. And I say Soviet in the sense of what that word actually means, which is like council or whatever.
To the point that, like we've mentioned before, they are actively trying to create a god that
Mm-hmm.
they control. That's
Yeah.
the whole overarching thing. And what you'll find, and this isn't a spoiler because Apollyon 20XX, anybody who's listened to us knows that this is just the first of many eras. Like this story is going to end with the destruction of the world as we know it,
Mm-hmm.
and then we build a new world from the ashes of that.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to be millennia in length.
Yeah, because there's if you take that, this the all of these ideas that we've been talking about week in and week out, if you take these things and allow them to be strong and gain power and gain momentum and reach their logical conclusion,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately that conclusion is destruction. It has to be.
Yeah, it's not going to be life. And like,
Exactly.
I mean, I was listening to a podcast earlier and I didn't get to finish it, but a biologist discussing the dangers of AI, particularly AI paired with
Mm-hmm.
CRISPR or gene editing in general. And he kept
Mm-hmm.
using a term that I'm not familiar with. And I'm going to sound so ignorant right now, which is fine because I am. Basically, phenotype evolution, huge jumps in evolution, and how if you put an AI in charge of gene editing, like of aggregating gene data and being able to pick and choose kind of how genes go, what it will eventually do, because they've seen this in evolution with ants and bees, is that it will reduce humans to essentially slaves to whatever is editing the gene. Because that's the theory, at least, because ants and bees probably, this is their theory, used to be more individualistic, and then as it bred to a hive idea that only one being in the hive reproduces, which is the queen, that's why they are subservient to it, and then that got even more evolved into what we see now. C.S. Lewis put it way better in Mere Christianity than this guy did, but those are two different. No, I'm sorry, not Mere Christianity, the Abolition of Man. he put it more succinctly and more in a philosophy, but that's basically what he was talking about, except on a physical level, the abolition of humankind as we know it, into whatever there would be.
Yeah, into whatever comes next.
Yeah, and it's not going to be good. So we're not trying to doom monger here or fear porn for anybody, but I think that's the thin line that we want to talk about this stuff and address it and offer a way out and an alternative rather than like the Tim Pool thing of just putting Civil War in red letters on every podcast topic. every
Well,
You
and
see what I'm
to
saying?
go back, yeah, to go back to something that we said a lot earlier in this particular episode. If you look at what we're creating with the Godfrey universe, uh, ultimately the best way to look at it is this is a cautionary tale.
Mm-hmm.
This is it's fiction. It's interesting, but it is informed by things that are real issues today, and to some degree, it's allegorical, or at the very least, it paints a picture of a potential end
Mm-hmm.
that all this stuff could lead to. When the hedonistic pagan mindset is allowed to seek its own end, it takes everything else with it. And so, what we are trying to do is to speak against some of these ideologies to show, look, this is where this stuff ultimately can lead. This is the destruction that can come from it. So hopefully, by naming it, by standing up and you know publicly denouncing these things, we rob them of their power.
Yeah. So
It's
yeah.
the idea that, like, we stand in the gap and say, you know, as much as we I know we love Tolkien and we go on and on and on about Tolkien, but that idea of standing in front of the Balrog and saying, "You shall not pass." This is
Mm-hmm.
where this is the and using the light to do that, to hold the
Yeah.
darkness at bay, and even if that means sacrificing yourself to go down, to take the Balrog down, you do it. That's what art has always been good at doing, is being willing to stand up, show the thing that's ugly that nobody wants to look at, and defeat it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that last thing, and that's how this kind of stuff goes. Um, the defeated part is important because that's the first thing that got cut off. And in modern
Yeah.
art, it's well, we just show terrible things,
Mhm.
and then you cut that off, and then what you're left is like the basis of why create art, and it's well for propaganda, and that's
Mhm.
how that kind of demoralization process goes, and then the recreation. We talked about that with dialectical inversion.
In
Yeah.
Yeah, inversion.
And I was just thinking that actually that every time, and this is a cool thing, we'll actually make a podcast of this of like Tolkien and the like the insidiousness or the rise of evil. But a lot of people, like when you look at Tolkien, it's you think that when you defeat Sauron, it's over. And a lot of people kind of rip Tolkien for like, oh, this kind of fairy tale view of evil that it can just be defeated once and for all. Well, he never preached that.
Mm-mm.
And he showed it from the beginning with Isildur, where it's like you can defeat evil, but until you defeat it within yourself,
Mm-hmm.
it will corrupt the individual, then the society, then the world, and then you're back in the shadow. And that's what the ring
Right.
is.
Well, and he also showed how when people try to come back and say, "Hey, you know, this thing that was defeated such a long time ago, man, it looks like it's coming back."
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's always met with skepticism by the same people that fought it before.
Yep.
Will say, "Well, no, that's you're just jumping at shadows. That's not there's nothing to fear." And the same people that are saying there's nothing to fear, we find out, oh, they're actually in league with the darkness.
Mm-hmm. Saruman.
Yeah, he's pretending to be the light.
Yeah. And it's already
You know,
conquered
you
him.
yeah. So the idea of speaking the name of the evil one, speaking it, declaring it, dragging it into the light,
Mm-hmm.
and and standing against it, not just pointing it out, but standing against it. That's what art is needs to do. That's what, rather than just like you said, glorify it and just display it for everyone. We have to see people willing to stand up and actually go to war with these ideologies.
Yeah. Well, that's going back to bring it full circle. I'm not claiming Roald Dahl was a virtuous person who was trying to tell virtuous stories for children. I know he had a history of anti-Semitism. Apparently, I genuinely don't care what an author or creator says or does if the art is good. I mean, I'm not trying to be flippant, but I can separate the two. If it wasn't
Yeah.
personally done to me, I can separate the two, and I can admit that. But I mean, I'm sure I've enjoyed. If I would definitely read if someone was like all white, funky looking dudes with bad hair need to die. If his art was good, I'd still read it, even if it's
Yeah.
directed. um,
Yeah.
but anyway, but the stuff they're removing and calling it non-inclusive does seem to be stuff that was kind of a cautionary thing and not so
Hmm.
flippant. If he had written
Hmm.
something blatantly, and that's what I was going to say. The stuff that tends to be blatantly something we disagree with, it tends to fade away. No one is promoting the protocols of the elders of Zion and that kind of crap.
Yeah.
That stuff fades away in our society. The stuff that lasts, like Dahl, doesn't need to be changed. And so that
Hmm.
point is out. And if it's so offensive, no one would have been buying it. So it doesn't seem as if it's wrong in it's from a moral or truth standpoint, and it doesn't seem like it's offensive. So it seems
Hmm.
like it's something that you're changing because you don't like what he said that was cautioning against, which goes I'd have to just say I think they just don't like the words he used because they hurt somebody's feelings one time.
Hmm.
Or more insidiously, whoever controls language kind of controls the society, unfortunately.
Whoever controls the spice controls the universe.
If you can control what people read, then you can control what they think and what they write and speak. And we talked about before. If people think by speaking and writing, and they learn to do both of those things a lot by reading.
Hmm.
Anyway, so I don't know. I'm fine ending it there. If you are, man, I mean, we could
Yeah,
go
that's a
for.
good
Yeah,
spot.
I don't want to go too much into talking without Steven. We'll get
Yeah,
him back
yeah,
on here.
yeah.
But anyway, we have a lot coming out, guys. We have more. I don't say this flippantly. We have more than almost any indie creator, not even for comics, but any indie creator has coming for you guys. We have short films, multiple podcasts, multiple comics, novels. I mean, various other writings, like just kind of like free novellas and stuff. Josh, we got the
Hmm.
Codex coming out for the Biofile Codex. We've got the
The
Apollyon.
game, video
We got a
game.
video game coming out. We've got Apollyon 20XX Revelations coming out, which is a sequel to Lamentations, which will also tie into another comic, The Blitz Beast, which will be like an issue by issue comic instead of like big fat ones. Uh, we might have a card game. We talked about doing that, and don't see any reason why we can't or won't do it. We'd love to do it,
Hmm.
and we're trying to do all of this. Yeah.
Ultimately, like what the way this is going to work is, because we are, in a lot of ways, we're not selling to through Barnes and Noble and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. We are selling to fans. That's the great thing about independent stuff, is that we're independent artists, independent creators, content creators. We're selling directly to you. So if you like Apollyon 20XX, when that first volume comes in, if you like it, if you want more of that world, then you need to share it
Yeah, and
and
you're gonna get it. Yeah.
continuously. Yeah, you're going to get it, and you're gonna share it, and you're gonna say, "Hey, this is this is what I just read. You should read it, and you should buy it too." And the more we're able to get out to you, the more of these other things can become a reality too.
And our world is so big that we literally had to get a guy to be our lore master. Like it's 40K or something. Like we've literally got a guy named Lore Master Hans that's going to be doing videos for us soon. That's going to be breaking down the overview of the world and different concepts, the different magic system parts, different eras, different history. Like that's how big this thing is.
So
So
if you're a lore nut like we are,
yeah.
you're gonna love this stuff.
Well, I want the nerds and the fans and the geeks like and the outcasts. Like that's what you know we are. And
Hmm.
people have forgotten that fan means fanatic. So when I hear the term toxic fan, unless that fan is trying to kill somebody, like they're the Beatles or something, I don't see how a fan can be toxic when all the whole point of being a fan is that you're obsessed with something and you're fanatical about it. So
Exactly.
that's who we want to deal with. We want to meet. We want to make stuff for. Like
Yeah.
we're never gonna belittle our fans by doing disrespecting canon or or revamping something stupid or selling it to some publishing house that will change it after we're dead. Or selling it to Disney, which is the worst thing you could probably do for anything you care about, including your children. But anyway,
uh,
is there anything you want to add, Josh, for this week?
no, I think that's good. I think that's good. I think we've covered that topic pretty well. I'd love to hear what other people think. I mean, we say that all the time: like, subscribe, comment, share
Mm-hmm.
the links, all of that
Tell
stuff.
us how wrong and stupid we are.
Tell us how stupid looking we are.
I had a guy. I'll pull up his name real quick, if I can. But he corrected me on the last podcast I did with Daryl. I credited, and in my defense, I said it's like who I thought did it, not 100% who did. I credited Razor Fist, the Rageaholic, with coining the phrase the Iron Age because
Hmm.
that's all I thought. I was like, well, whatever. But he corrected me and said it was Peter Samedi from Alterna Comics, and the guy who did that is called Resistance Publishing, and he comments on a good bit. So shout out to you, Resistance Publishing, and thank you for that correction. I mean, I didn't know, which is like I said in my defense. I said I think this is who coined it, or most people know it from this. But I'm glad to have like that actual information of who did it, so now I can
Yeah.
track it down and look it up. So I'll definitely check out Alternate Comics. I think I've looked at their stuff before, briefly, because I remember that name and I remember it being like something that was kind of cool. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, anything like that, I welcome it because our egos aren't that big. We don't base our brand off being right,
Off being what?
white. Especially now, we don't. As if I could help it. My albino looking self. Hey, we have an albino character, Ox, from
Yeah, she's
Apollyon.
awesome too.
Yeah, Apollyon 20XX. She has an Imperial heart, so her blood is both powered and tainted, but she looks albino because of it. Super pale, like red eyes, blonde, if not
Yes,
white hair.
yeah, she's dope.
Yeah, she's really cool. Anyway, all right, guys, we'll sign off for this week, and I'll holler at you later. Peace.